Welcome to the Varside Spurs podcast. And today with me for a change is Rich.
Hello, mate. We're getting a bit like Saturday swap shop, me and you, aren't we?
Yeah, either that or was it Waldorf and Statler?
Well, honestly, that's what I do. You know, Chris Chapman, who's one of the Twitter guys. He's the guy that I
Oh,
generally
yes.
tend to
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
most games with.
yeah.
He and I have been going to games together for years, and that's generally the accepted truth is that hit me and him as Statler and Waldorf because we sit there and go, "This is terrible, more,"
Heckling,
you know.
heckling from,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I aspire to be that. Actually, my wife thinks I aspire to be Larry David.
Uh, well, none of these things are bad things to aim for, are
No, that's it. The older you
they?
get, the less patience you get with a lot of crap, don't you, really?
Well, and there's certainly a lot of that about at the minute. Anyway,
Oh,
how are
totally.
you? That's the main
Yeah, I'm
thing.
good, thank you. Yeah, really good. Did a nice 7 mile run this morning and felt all right. I mean, uh, I, I'm slow. My legs are, not what they used to be. So there's no spring in them. So I just put one
Yeah,
foot in front of the other and get round. But after everything, I'm pleased. I'm pleased to be there.
you're showing me up with your distance anyway. I cut down from that sort of distance a few years ago, and occasionally these days I manage to get out for 5K, but I don't really have the enthusiasm for any more now,
No,
you know.
no, no. To be honest, if it isn't for pods or for audio books and things like that, it would be more difficult. So I just put that on, get in the zone, and off I go. In fact, if a couple of times I've driven the route that I've run, and thought, fucking hell, it's quite a way, that isn't it? Really, you just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I just lose myself, I don't even realize it.
Yeah, we the one thing that keeps me going is without going too much on a tangent is I'm quite a big park runner and I do the park run up in Leamington, but the guy I do it with gets there half an hour before everybody else and runs it once and then stops for a glass of water and runs it again with us, and he still beats me on the second time round, you know.
Yeah, some people are just like they haven't got the same system as most other human beings, have they?
No,
You
no,
know.
bastards.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, so I thought we might start, shall we, with a little sort of wrap up of the transfer window, and because there were some fairly exciting things that happened on the last day, really. Um,
Yeah.
so the saga, as we thought, Rich, we predicted, didn't we, that it would still go through for Porro despite a lot
Yeah.
of bedwetting. What are your thoughts on him, if you know much about him at all? Or,
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I've done so much as watch a YouTube show reel. Only the only time I've ever seen him is when we played against him. Um, I'm excited that we've got a different option in because that side of the field has been very much a weak spot, hasn't it?
yeah,
So and there's a bit of me that does this deliberately, I mean, especially after all the fanfare with Ndombele and then what that turned into. And
yeah.
that's only one of a whole host of examples of people that we can see that look amazing on video reels, and then when we get them, they don't even know what shape a ball is, let alone where to find it.
Yeah, yeah,
So I tend to sort of just let people come with a clean slate and hope that everybody's going to be, a sort of a Luka Modric discovery, because we can live in hope that our scattergun approach to recruitment might pay off every once in a while. So, but he's here, and I'm excited to see him. But I am sad that Matt Doherty's gone.
yeah, yeah. We'll come to that one in a second, actually, because that I think that deserves a special kind of mention in itself. But on Porro himself, I like you. I don't know massive amounts. I saw him when he played against us, and I thought he looked great.
Yeah,
And and judging by a lot of other people who are probably better informed than I am, he seems to have quite a good skill set. Not only a really good attacker, but he can cut back well and he can cross really well, and sometimes takes a free
mm,
kick. And like you're saying about the scattergun approach, we probably spent about 200 and odd million just trying to replace Kyle Walker, haven't we? So
yeah.
maybe this time we've got it right.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. It's got to work eventually. And if nothing else, it probably means that we won't have to listen to any more tedious talk of, Adama,
Yeah, yeah.
Adama Traore coming in. That should put that that very boring conversation to bed finally.
Totally. I mean, the only thing I mean, what I would say on it is that he just looks absolutely perfect fit for Conte's system. So he's actually a right wing back. He's not, that's it. That's his specialism. So we've not only backed the manager on that front and possibly overpaid. In the, probably last year would have gone for about 25, 30 million. We've paid something like 39 million, 40 million for him. But if you want a player, and we really did, you got to cough up, haven't you?
Yeah, and we have to put it into context. In to use a cliche in today's game, 40 million quid isn't all that much money for a player, is it? Considering. I mean, what's the final total combined fee for Bentancur and Kulusevski? Was that 70 or 80?
I think
and how
70 or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
How bigger impact has each of one of those players made for essentially a similar fee? So I mean, let's just hope that it is a Conte signing and not a club signing, as he's wont to say, and that as a result he gets game time.
And Chelsea have screwed the market anyway for everybody. When they with Enzo, they paid 100 and what was it, 5 million or something, and their club signed him for 8.5 million in June. Pretty much made 100 million turnover in the space of about sort of 8 or 9 months. It's madness.
I mean, a fool and his money are easily parted. Is my take on it. I mean, they're obviously sort of going big at the moment because they've got an eye on, they're doing this, extending these contracts over huge amounts of time to amortize the fee, and that and there are rules coming in, aren't there, next year to stop that happening. So they're obviously doing a lot of this with an eye to sort of circumventing that now, so that they don't have to spend later. But again, I mean, if we've got a scattergun approach, they've got a long tradition of paying, huge amounts of money for bang average players. I mean, you've only got to look at what they paid for Lukaku last year, or the year before now,
100 million.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not fit to lace Harry Kane's boots, is he?
No, exactly. So, well, it is one of those things that probably 50-60% of players that you buy just don't work out for your club. So it's to spend that kind of money that they've spent, like 600 odd million, is that's a massive gamble.
It is, yeah, especially considering where they are in the table as well. I mean, you could almost justify it if they were, where we are, a couple of points off the Champions League places, because that money, a huge proportion of it would be recouped in Champions League, sort of television rights over the next year or what have you. But they don't seem to be anywhere near that. And even if they mount a charge, who is it they're going to displace in order to get there? Because there'll be a lot of dead bodies they've got to climb over to qualify for it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned Matt Doherty. He seems to have been one of the casualties to be able to get Porro in. But the twist in the end there was, something you might see in an Agatha Christie movie, isn't it? Really, it's a really, really strange one. I don't know. What do you think? Was this planned, or do you think it was a cock up?
I really don't bloody know. I mean, the only thing that I can think is that they were hoping to move a different player on for a permanent fee in order to free him up from the squad to go on loan. But one of the other loanees, perhaps a move fell through. And so, that was the last sort of stumbling block. I mean, to just cancel his deal with, what was it, 18 months left on it?
I think it was, yeah. I think it was.
It seems odd because, and I know I've said to you privately recently, 12 months ago, everybody was laughing at him, jeering him, I mean, he
called him Donkety and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, all this, I mean, he was really getting what we might call the Emerson Royale treatment.
Yeah.
And then, as a response to that, he put his head down and worked his bollocks off. And by the time he picked up that injury in the spring, it was a disaster for the first 11. And people were routinely, without a sense of irony or sarcasm, saying this could derail our Champions League push. And so he's gone from, that status in the squad to them just going, well, just let him go for nothing then, You'd have thought if they were going to let anybody go for nothing, it would have been one of the others that play in that position.
Yeah, I had a good think about this earlier on when I was out on that run I was telling you about, and I'm thinking I can see why they've done it though, because he's 31. He's really probably not going to get a contract renewal. He's probably not going to figure in our plans. We wouldn't get much money for him anyway. And if you think about his salary over the next year and a half, that's probably four and a half, 5 million, let's say. Um, if you take him off the books, what were you going to get? Probably like a loan fee of about 4 million. You might have even only sold him for about that as well.
Well, I mean,
Um,
I think we only paid 12 for him when he came
yeah,
in as well, didn't we? So it's not
exactly,
as if he owed us a lot in transfer fees. But so yeah, I
exactly.
mean, I guess with that in mind, it's possibly a better bet long term to think that we could keep hold of Emerson Royale,
Mm. Well, he's had a couple
But
of good games recently, hasn't he, Royale? And okay, he might not be up to snuff, but he's 22, is he 23? He's
yeah,
got more
yeah.
potential, more resale value. You wouldn't make any sense to release someone like that you spent nearly 30 million on, and he's still a young man and probably, got a lot more improvement to do. So either if he doesn't improve with us, you've still got someone who you can definitely sell. Whereas
Mm.
I think you'd be struggling to get someone to take Doherty off your hands unless you did release him.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is possibly the case, isn't it? But it came completely out of left field for me. I didn't expect it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because everyone, I mean, including that, that's the way it was came across from all the reputable sources that basically he was going on loan.
Mm,
That was all the ticker and the banners are all saying that. And then
mm,
all of a sudden, for the club to tweet out that we've mutually terminated his contract, for me, it smacks of that they just hadn't quite worked out that they had 8 other players out on loan.
mm,
They're never going to admit it, and it's guesswork on our part, but um because when you I think it was Alistair Gold who'd said the players were quite shocked at the situation, so that obviously they didn't think that this was going to happen. And if Harry Kane's his best club mate, then you would have thought he would have sort of said, look, club, I'm parting ways with the club, I'm going to Atletico. It didn't look that way, did it? It looked like he was loaning out and coming back at the end of the season. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
seems a bit strange, a bit of a balls up. But in the end, I suppose all's good all's well that ends well.
yeah. I mean, I suppose the only other thing is, if we're indulging in absolute conjecture, it's whether or not the Jed Spence situation complicated it. Perhaps they thought Spence would stay and work in the squad for the season, but he's pushed for that loan out to Rennes,
Mm.
and maybe that came quite late in the day, and they realised, perhaps Paratici was far too busy worrying about whether or not he was going to have to raise bail money, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
in order to continue walking a free man, and took his eye off the fact that these things were moving more quickly. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I wish him all the best. I mean, I think it was unfair the abuse that he got last year, although I'm not blind to the fact that he did have a few bad games in order to sort of court that kind of response from the fans. But it's yeah, we move on.
Yeah. And Spence was an interesting one going to Rennes. I think that's quite a bold choice, really, because there were, I mean, Atletico apparently asked for him as well, and there were a number of teams that were after him, and quite a few in the Premier League.
I think
He could have done
Brentford were
that.
after him, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
I believe that the stumbling block for a lot of those other potential moves was that they all wanted a buy-on clause inserted, and the club
Ah, right. Okay.
were against that, weren't they? I think
Yeah.
having a compulsory purchase at the end of the loan. So, I don't know, and perhaps that's a reflection of whether or not they're not entirely sure whether or not Antonio is going to be there at the end of the season. Because if we are looking at a potential change of manager for next season,
Mhm.
it's possible that Spence can come back in and do a job at the club.
Yeah, yeah, and it might also need to factor in that Spence probably really wants to play, and he's probably going to have more chance to play at Rennes.
Mm,
I believe their right back is like got a long term injury at the moment, so
yeah.
he'd probably get a bit of a good run in the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to do him any harm. I mean, he will have been detrimentally affected, this year, having gone from being a much more integral part of the, of sort of Forest before he came to us, that to then just be sat around for 6 months at
Mm,
his age, yeah, you can see why he's wanted to do it. So, hopefully he comes back, because he's a player that I would love to see more in a Spurs shirt.
yeah, yeah. And Kittle, I thought that was a bit of a surprise. I thought he might get to stay because he's done so much work, hasn't he? Like to try and put on a bit of weight. He's looked good. The fans really like him.
Mm.
I was quite surprised for him to go out, but maybe that suits all parties.
Well, maybe, with Porro coming in, the idea is that the system will change slightly and that he would get less opportunity, because you'd imagine there that, Kulusevski's going to play less of an advanced winger role
Mm,
now, playing in the inside channel a little bit more, maybe coming in to bolster that midfield that gets walked through so
hmm hmm
frequently. And in that context, his appearances as generally as a substitute or as an injury replacement for Dejan Kulusevski will be limited,
Yeah,
and maybe that is why it's happened again. I thought he'd come along leaps and bounds, and I'd been really impressed with the little bits that I'd seen him, especially in the Palace game.
yeah.
I thought he was a completely different player to the sort of kid that arrived the previous year.
Perhaps he also thought maybe his chances might be limited with Dan Juma coming in as well, because
Mm.
that probably steps on his toes somewhat.
Well, yeah, quite possibly, quite possibly. So, I mean, it's interesting times, isn't it? I mean, this is what we needed. They were two they're the two positions that needed addressing. We needed to have a differentiated threat up front, because teams have got very canny at shutting us out, and also we needed to be able to move players around to put extra bodies in the centre without changing the system, because obviously Conte is very wedded to the system that he's playing. So let's just hope that that is enough to transform the really patchy form that we had going into the window. And that, let's hope, beyond all hope, that they are working on centre back and goalkeeper replacements behind the scenes, ready for the start of the next transfer window, and
Well, they
not the
have to,
fucking end of
surely.
it.
Yeah, I mean, uh, they've been talking about that. I mean, Alistair Gold, etc., were talking about that a season or so ago. That's what they've identified, but we've got nowhere near it. I mean, either we really have a strict criteria, and we really are waiting for the very, very top players, which don't come along very often, and not sort of we because we won't throw huge sums at it. But then I don't know. For that type of player, if you're going to get a player to upgrade on what we got, you are going to be looking at, because we need probably a couple of centre backs and a goalkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be looking at the best part of 150, 200 million for those three.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at, how rare is a really good, reliable, long-term goalkeeping replacement, and I think, you look back to the money. I think Kepa went for 70 million, and that
Yeah,
was pre-COVID. So you're going to be looking at 100 million quid plus, really, to sign somebody of a proper
mm-hmm.
caliber. Otherwise, you're picking up goalkeepers that have got well-known frailties already in their game. So,
Yeah.
and like you say,
Mm.
it's not a common position to have that sort of strength in.
No, exactly. And I think like Liverpool, they spent what was it, 18 million on Allison,
Mm,
and although he's throwing them in the net at the moment, but but that was one of the the areas they needed to, and they went out and spent big on it. Rumors are
mm,
we're interested in Oblak.
mm.
He's I know he's not a spring chicken, but goalkeepers can be playing until they're about 35, can't they? So
Well, yeah, yeah.
I think
Well, yeah, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? My head says that we need to go and throw a huge amount of money at it and make a marquee signing in that
yeah,
position more than
yeah.
anybody else, more than anywhere else. My heart tells me that we will probably end up with fucking Jordan Pickford or somebody like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. There's another keeper I've never even heard of, but people were talking about someone Merritt or someone.
Mm,
Never even heard of him, but apparently there's one that we're air quotes in love with.
mm.
You know,
Well, let's just wait and see if they're in love with us, eh?
yeah, yeah. So the window good enough, do you reckon, or not?
it could have been better, needed to do more. I think we
Mm,
really did need to bring somebody defensive in. I think we've got a lot of frailty in that back line. And as much as I like Romero, I think he's prone to picking up cards.
hmm
He's also proved this season that he's prone to picking up niggling injuries, and if we lose him,
mm,
we're onto bare bones quite quickly. We're then relying on Davinson Sanchez and Eric Dyer to have world beating performances on a regular basis. Otherwise, we're going to be letting in goals like they're going out of fashion. And
mm,
so
mm.
I'm disappointed that they didn't address that. I think the goalkeeper probably would have had to have waited until the summer anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think it would have been so difficult to have brought in somebody that would have done a job at centre half, even if it was
Mm.
another loan deal. So, that aside, I'm pleased with what we have brought in. It's a shame they turned it into another Tottenham saga, but unfortunately, that's the animal we're dealing with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, either they've got a very short, specific list, um, or they've got less funds than we think they've got because they're going to have to spend it in the summer. And I suspect I know we're interested in Guardiol. I don't know if
Mm,
he's beyond us now. Bastoni again keeps getting mentioned, but you are talking like 60, 70 for him and 80, 90 for Guardiol, and that's a lot of money. And Skriniar was available for 20. And
mhm.
if we would have paid more wages and if we would have gone for that, I think we could have done it. He's worked with Conte before. It was something that could have been done. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. I mean, this is the kind of change that needs to happen at the club now, doesn't it? I'm sure
Mm,
we'll come on to the club and their plans and their stated aims for the near and middling future, but these are the areas where they need to really, really change their operating procedure. Like you
yeah.
say, lift that ceiling on the wages. That will make a major difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Conte's already spoken in the past about identifying targets and then the difficulty being, whether
Actually
or not
getting
they
them.
want to come to Tottenham.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and part of that is going to be the money they're earning. So,
Well, that's it. If they're
um,
going to go to
yeah,
PSG or Man City or somewhere like that, then they're pretty much guaranteed to win stuff there. The only way you might sort of turn their head is if we overpay, and because at the moment we're a project, and
mm,
you kind of like City they had to overpay a lot at the beginning to be able to get in this type of player that they needed to be able to be challengers,
mm.
because they were useless for a long time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we need to be acutely aware of as well, thinking about the teams that are around us, is that Liverpool are probably going to be spending big this summer because they're a side that have got big problems,
Mm,
and if we're competing for similar players to them, we're going to be in big trouble because not only do we not have the recent silverware to entice them in, we don't have the status that Liverpool have got in Europe as a winning, successful, famous club to play for.
hmm
And if you combine those two things with a more tightly controlled wage structure, you're never going to be able to sort of win the duel with a club like that.
No, no.
And although they might be looking for more players in different positions, they've got central midfield issues and they've got, various other things they need to address. They will be in the market, and if they want to, you know, reclaim the place that they've lost this season,
Mm,
they're going to go in big.
yeah. I mean, you think of it like a Formula One rally. The top ones are at the front. They're always going to be. So if you're behind, you've got to try and find some way to catch up. So we need to
Mm,
be doing sort of double step basically, because Liverpool
mm,
might need to bring one or two players, and we need to bring three, four. And so
yeah,
if we don't do that, and we play the slow and steady game, and we play it over the next few windows, it might be too late.
yeah.
So although we built a really good team, the others are pulled away already anyway, and all they need to do is just add a player every so often.
Well, yeah, and of course, we've got the elephant in the room as well is that they haven't started doing it yet, but at some point Newcastle are going to start flexing their financial
Oh
muscle.
yeah, yeah,
And then that's another side that we're competing against, and that's a different sort of project. It's a
yeah.
project that's backed by people who have said they're going to spend, and club that's got ambition. And the difficulty for us is that away from the money and away from everything else, you're trying to persuade players to come to a club that seems to have been in continuous flux since
Mm,
2018.
yeah.
So, they have that sort of, Newcastle are going to have that narrative arc that it's a new project. They've
Mm,
come from nowhere. They're pushing for top four this year. They're going to be there or thereabouts. They play good football. They've got a big stadium. They of course, they've got the same thing that we've got, is that they don't have any recent silverware to say, look, you're coming to a successful club. But they do say, they are going to be able to say, look, we can throw money around. Manchester City have created the example of, creating these fictitious sponsor companies as a way to
yeah,
circumvent
yeah,
FFP, and you can see Newcastle doing something very, very similar now, and leapfrogging even people like Liverpool, because they will just be able to bung millions of pounds extra on
oh yeah.
wage packets,
And they'll probably get Bellingham. And you say
Yeah.
about Newcastle not having a trophy for ages, you know that they're going to win the that cup coming up, the League Cup, and then we'll get bantered over that one, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, yeah. So, I always look at that trophy as a missed opportunity when
Mm.
you sort of look and you think, well, it's if we were in there, it's Newcastle or Manchester United. We could beat either of them.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and again, we're not. We're not even going to be there.
Nah. Still, if we get the FA Cup, that trumps that particular competition. I'd be well happy with that. I think we could,
Yeah.
another good draw after this one. If hopefully, touch wood, we get through. I think we'll do well.
Yeah, I think the closer we get, and like we say, I said the last week or the week before that the difference from the tone in the club has changed. That before it was a stated objective that it was the Premier League and the Premier League and the Champions League, sorry. And yet now, Harry Kane came out. I think it was Kane was saying after one of the games, the FA Cup is one of our priorities.
Mm.
So they clearly have a different approach this year, and I will expect us to treat it with a little bit more seriousness. And
Good.
like you
Mm.
say, if we can lift it, I was there the last time we won it, and I was a first year at high school.
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and I'm not saying that was a long time ago, but I've been teaching for nearly 20 years. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's grown men that have never seen us win the FA Cup.
yeah,
It's just ridiculous. So
yeah.
yeah. Anyway, should we just quickly touch on? I've not gone into a great deal of detail, but I kind of avoided it on Twitter as well. It seemed to have really gone into sort of overdrive when the trust did their Q&A. They posed the questions. They got kind of fairly generic defensive answers back from the club. Did you manage to read it? Did you get what did you make of it?
I glazed over at my attempts to take it all in. I mean, I think it's typical large bubble operating institution not really wanting to communicate with a load of people who are just a source of income and possibly without wanting to create any false conspiracy narratives. I very much get the sense that this fan engagement stuff is something that they would really rather do without.
Yeah, yeah,
And obviously, the trust have done what they've done in the recent past, calling for the
mm,
board to be replaced, burn any bridges that they might have
yeah,
had, and possibly this is them reaping what they sow. So,
yeah.
I mean, I didn't expect anything more, anything more meaningful from the club. So,
No,
um,
I just think that there's an opportunity there for them to kind of build bridges and reach out a little bit. It did feel a bit spiky and a bit defensive, and they sounded like they were really surprised at any criticism. And I suppose that from their point of view, the way they see it, because it becomes, I suppose, like groupthink, doesn't it? They
mhm,
surround themselves with people that all tell them the things they want to hear.
yeah,
And as far as they're concerned, is they're getting rid of some players, they're steadily getting in players, etc. But they just don't seem to be connecting in emotionally with the fans. They don't seem to be listening to concerns and allaying them. So, like when Conte says, "Well, it would be good for the club to come out and speak about what
Mm.
strategies are, etc. That's part of that. And although that they've spoke on this front, it's really sort of obfuscating. Really, there's not that much clarity, just a lot of defensive kind of posturing going on. And of course,
Mm.
I suppose, like you said, they're not what they're going to do when the trust has called for the board to resign. They're naturally going to be defensive about the whole thing. They mentioned they've seen a lot of the criticism online, and which again they said they're surprised that instead of addressing it and saying, look, rest assured, we love this club, we want it to do this, we wanted it, instead of sort of saying all those right things,
Mm.
they just go on the defensive. And then of course all those same people that were going crazy end up, it just basically confirms their bias.
It does, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I do have a little bit of sympathy in that regard for them, because I don't think
Mm,
they could have said anything that would have quietened people down.
no.
I don't think, certainly, like you say, the online discourse during this latter part of the window, especially, has been particularly toxic.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I don't think you can talk people back from that.
No,
You know,
it's a rabbit hole, isn't it? And even today, I saw someone saying, "Come on, guys, we really need to get into the stadium and make it ultra toxic when we get in there on Sunday."
yeah. I
And
mean,
I'm
fucking
thinking,
hell, what's that
what
going to achieve?
exactly? Who wants to go to a match to experience toxicity? We don't want that. We want we want to feel good about going there again. And okay, things aren't they're things that could be done better, but we don't need to foment unrest all the time, do we? Sometimes we just want to go and enjoy ourselves and enjoy a match.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, I think, you know, protests and all that are perfectly legitimate. I mean, in any other context, I'm a lifelong protester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was known to metaphorically chain myself in front of bulldozers when I was a teenager to stop roads being built and all that. So,
Yeah,
I'm not,
yeah,
I'm not averse to direct action, put it like that.
yeah.
But I think when the team comes out on the pitch, there's a very difficult thing to take into consideration, which is, I mean, you've only got to listen to players from other clubs that have said, in other contexts, look, the fans have really got behind us through a difficult period, and it's lifted us and it's helped us, and it's,
Mm,
that, they've carried us through it. And, you hear people like Marcus Rashford of talking about the improved atmosphere at Old Trafford now and how that's bolstering the team, a
yeah,
team, a team itself, which is still in development. I mean, they're on a good run at the moment, or have
yeah.
been, and instead of getting on continually on the back, and let's be honest, Manchester United supporters en masse are not backwards in coming forwards in their dislike for their owners,
Mm,
and
mm,
and the manager, and how things have been handled with the playing staff at times. And yet they're still managing to get behind the team in a positive way. And I would like to see something more along those lines, where if you're going to protest, you know where the offices are, where
yeah,
how you
yeah.
get to the people that matter. You aren't going to do it on the terraces. All you're going to really do is affect the team.
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
and although I don't want to say that people should just be happy and what have you, I mean, great. But this kind of, the mass walkouts and all that, I mean,
It's not
I
going to
just
happen.
well, I don't think it's going to happen, and I question its effectiveness.
Yeah. And if you've got like 50 people or even 100 people just who walk out, you won't even notice it,
Well,
because it'll
no, I
be
mean,
various places all over the stadium. People just think they've gone for a pee, or they've
gone for a
gone for a
beer, yeah,
beer. Yeah.
yeah, exactly that. I mean, unless you do get mass mobilization, and the thing is, the debate is so fractious, and everybody's turning on each other in a way that alienates somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it's eating itself as a movement.
Yeah.
You've got.
Yeah.
I've seen these so-called bloody football hard men on Twitter this week, calling each other out, and I'll meet you on the corner by the park
Oh,
lane, and
yeah.
we'll,
Yeah.
I'll
You're the
fight you if
problem
you,
for this club and you need sorting out and all
yeah,
this kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's like, well, I don't understand how you think you're going to bring people onto your side with that kind of thing,
No,
because
exactly.
you're not.
No, I agree. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation, but and obviously the play has a lot to do with it. If things are going swimmingly well on the field, then things change. Like you look at how toxic it was down the road with the goons,
Mm,
and now
mm,
they're singing all
yeah,
these sort of like fake songs that they've made up about North London and all this kind of stuff, and it's
Yeah.
all happy clapping now.
Yeah, yeah. Mind you, though, I mean, I must say on that, a very timely thing for when we're recording this pod. It was beautiful to see them lose at Everton this afternoon.
Yes, very nice. And
You
one of
know,
my family members is a season ticket holder at Everton, and he's long suffering. So it was a nice one today. He says, "We're going to
yeah.
try and do you a favor today."
Yeah, yeah, and you can sort of see it tomorrow. Like it sets us up for beating Man City and just compounding any use that it's
Yeah,
that drop 3 points is going to have in the championship place.
yeah, yeah. So, you pointed up to me actually. I was going to read it, but when you sent me a link to Aaron Lennon's latest interview, where he's really open and frank about his mental health issues, I thought it was a fascinating interview. Talks about his love for the club, and talks about actually Sean Dyche and how kind of understanding he was, but the depths that he went to, I don't think any of us really had quite the idea. I mean, we knew that he was in a bad place, but it really was quite heartbreaking to read some of the things that he'd said and where he was at and how close he felt to suicide at points.
Yeah.
What did you make of how the article and how open and honest he was?
Well, I mean, it struck me on many levels as quite an important interview, really, and in many respects, knowing how these things are done, I would like to have heard the full, because obviously it's quite
Mm,
heavily curated and edited down to
yeah,
get
yeah.
into a word count. And for anybody that's not seen it, it's Henry Winter for the Times,
Hmm.
and it is, maybe we could tweet a link through the podcast
Mm,
Twitter for it. I mean, I wanted to sort of raise it for a couple of reasons, really. Most importantly for me is because it sort of touches on mental health stuff, which is quite close to my heart
hmm.
because of my past. And like you say, I mean, my first impression that it was shocking to see how bad his situation had got for him.
Hmm.
I mean, it is a reminder. I think in all this in and amongst all of this sort of online toxicity and all of the abuse that fans are quite free to throw at players
Hmm.
for seemingly minor indiscretions or for just having a couple of bad games, I think it bears bearing in mind that these are human beings, and I think
Mm,
we can look at players like Aaron. Although he wasn't a player that was ever subjected to that sort of level of abuse at Spurs, and he's spoken quite openly about his love for Everton when he was there and how he settled in and felt very embraced, and like you say, Sean Dyche at Burnley, and but certainly, there's something in there about the sort of untold story, and strangely enough, it reminded me of the Danny Rose interview, the Danny Rose interview a
mm,
few
mm,
years ago. There was a piece in there about how football clubs treat players like pieces of meat, and how
mm,
how your welfare is the last consideration. It's your fitness and your ability to perform
hmm.
is the only thing that the clubs really care about. And it struck me that as I was reading this Lennon piece, that came to mind. Of course, they were in at the club, at a similar sort of time, although Lennon was obviously there a long time before Danny Rose. Um, that sort of culture at the club. He said that he felt that he should have left Tottenham sooner than he had. But within that, he did, like you say, he did sort of speak quite effusively about some of the wonderful memories he's had playing for the club and about how he loved it there. But also about the isolation, about
Mm,
moving away from home, and about that feeling, feeling homesick, feeling isolated, not being sort of supported on that pastoral
mm,
side. And I thought it was really an interesting piece, and I think it's a very brave piece because, of course, in this kind of toxic, overly masculine world that is sports support, he is going to get some pelters for it.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
not from Tottenham supporters, nor Everton and Leeds or Burnley either.
Although I'm sure
But
he got some from our fans, when it was time for him to go, there, would have been a lot of fans, I'm sure, message him saying, get out of our club and all this kind of stuff.
yeah, and and of course there is this sort of revisionist narrative now. They always used to say about him, oh, the thing about Lennon being at Spurs was that every time he got the ball, you could hear the sound of seats clacking as everybody stood up,
Mm,
And then
mm,
after he'd gone, that became, yeah, you could hear the sound of the seats clacking as everybody stood up, and then the sound of everybody sitting back down again when he fired it into Rose Edge, So
mm,
there was,
mm,
even back then, there was this sort of revisionism about it. But he was a very special player, and he was a player that
mm.
brought an awful lot of joy to us as supporters over the years. He's one of my favourite ever players in a Spurs shirt because
Yeah.
of that excitement and that freedom that he seemed to play with. And I think the interesting thing about this article was that it appears that at least some of that time he was playing with this mental health cloud over his
Hmm.
head, and he spoke about there being a spiral that began while he was still at Tottenham, and that wasn't picked up really until he was at Everton.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is a timely reminder that these guys are human beings.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, he makes a very
And under a real big microscope as well. So, it's just the rest of us sometimes find life difficult. But if you're a player in the spotlight like that, and everything you do is under a microscope, or nothing you can do is particularly secret, it must be even harder.
well, very much so. And of course, 15 years ago when he was early prime, when he was in the England squad. He spoke
Mm,
about the scrutiny of after the World Cup in South Africa in 2010, and this is still in the days when people like Rebecca Brooks were in charge of News of the World and papers like that, and they were always invading any kind of celebrity or any kind of
mm,
public profile figure, including sports people, rummaging through their bins trying to find dirt on them, and so that's going to have a really, really detrimental effect on people's lives. And of course, the criticism that is aimed at people like Lennon, like all professional footballers, is, well, you're paid millions of pounds, so you've got
mm.
to deal with it,
Yeah, yeah,
And frankly, I
yeah,
feel that's horseshit.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
but like I said, I mean, I always tend to flag this stuff up because, having been somebody that suffered very, very seriously with mental health problems, he spoke pointedly about suffering from psychosis,
Mm,
which is something I
mm,
experienced when I was younger. As part of my sort of ongoing treatment,
mm,
I'm not somebody that does the meditation and journaling sort of thing that he does, but there are various ways to address it, and I think any conversation like this is important to
mm,
take
mhm,
seriously.
mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah, I thought that was a really valuable piece, and all power to him for sticking his head up above the parapet to say that, because as a
100%.
retired player, he's got no,
Yeah.
unless he's,
But he talked about wanting to help others, didn't he? And this is one of the steps, I suppose. But what you were saying actually just rang a bell with me. I mean, I remember a few years back having an argument with a family member about that very thing, about the fact that just because they're paid fortunes don't mean to say that they are able to suffer all the slings and arrows that everyone fires at them. They're still a
no.
human being, and you can't just say because someone has a particular skill set and they're really good at something and they get paid a lot of money for it, that they should just put up with everything because they have this privilege in life. But our psyche, our minds, uh, you know, have no comprehension of the fact that you're paid really good money because you're good at football. It's you're if you find it difficult to cope with things, you need help around you.
Mm,
And I don't know what football is like for that, but a lot of organizations are not very good at it. um there was a time where a few years back where I felt at work I was really struggling at times. I felt like could easily have gone, to having a sort of bit of a nervous breakdown, to be honest, because I was getting panic attacks and anxiety over things, and meditation did help me.
mm,
Um, but the thing that he said in this article, which again chimed with me, was that he kept telling everybody it was no, it's all right, I'm okay, I'm okay. And because you probably feel it's a sign of weakness, you you carry on, and you try to tell everyone, or trying to make out it seems okay, because either you don't want to frighten people around you, or you don't want everyone to, or to show that weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, this is all turbocharged as well. I mean, on the one side, we've got all this money there being paid. But, like you were saying, in the workplace, when you're having a rough time, it's bad enough when you've got one person leaning over your shoulder telling you that you're shit and you're not doing your job properly, or whatever it is you're getting. You've got 40,000 of them doing it in front of you where you're trying to do your job. And place that into the context of, if you react,
Yeah,
you will
yeah,
face a ban and a hefty fine.
yeah.
And these people are trying to goad you into reacting. It kind of intensifies it. Like I say, it turbocharges the entire situation. And I think it's something that we should all sort of bear in mind, especially, when we're having a go at players.
Oh
And
yeah, totally.
yeah. So
And it doesn't take.
yes, go on.
So I was going to say, mate, it doesn't take much to tip some people over the edge. I mean, you can be sort of have a reasonable equilibrium, and then all of a sudden something may even be fairly small to some people, will just send them over the edge, and then they find it difficult to cope, and to carry on as normal. And I think but where are the systems in place to help that? I don't know if what they're like in sport, because you're expected just to be this kind of macho person who just can cope with everything, and with thousands of fans screaming at you as well, and it must be very difficult.
Yeah, it must be. But I would, without wishing to labour the point, I would certainly recommend that everybody has a look at that.
Yeah.
A look at that. And in the Times, as I say, it's Henry Winter has written it up, carried the interview out. And, I'd sort of take the opportunity that if you are sort of struggling, reach out. If you haven't got people that you can rely on, you've got there's the campaign against living miserably at calmzone.net. There are organizations out there that will help you if you're struggling with your mental health. So speak up, don't suffer. And well done to Aaron Lennon for bringing it back into the spotlight again.
Yeah, no, bravo to him. So tomorrow we are playing against the mighty Man City. We have a good record. Since we've moved to this new stadium, they haven't scored a single goal there.
Well,
and we've done pretty well against them. So we seem to be their bogey team.
Yeah, and in the context of having some pretty ropey streaks of form going into some of those games as well, So I mean, there's every reason to be confident.
However, we need to beat a top 6 club at some point, surely.
Yeah. However, we have to look at it in the context of the fact that we are technically managerless at the moment.
Yeah. There is that. I mean, I there's rumours that he might actually be in the stadium. He won't be on the touchline. He can't be. It'd be crazy. I mean, to be honest, he should really stay away and just take the rest. Luckily, I think this op itself, I was speaking to my wife, she's a pretty senior nurse, and she was saying, it's basically keyhole, and they just glue it. They don't even need to stitch it, but you normally need about a week to 10 days, good rest. And then you'll be fine. But
Well, I mean, the other thing to take into consideration here is people have made a lot of him not looking like he wants to be there, of him looking like we've broken him, or we've, somehow crushed him and we've done it to another manager. Perhaps we can all sort of redress some of those opinions now and think, well, look, who knew he was ill?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So let's hope he comes back nice and quickly.
Would you throw Pro straight in?
I think we'll see him after about 70 minutes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I think he probably would be ready to go straight in, but we tend to ease him in, don't we? We don't chuck him in straight away. And I know Paul O'Keefe's tweeted out that we'll be starting with Emerson tomorrow. So he's usually got it right.
Yeah, I mean that I saw that prediction. I mean, like you say, Paul's normally spot on, and the predicted response to that has been spot on as well. There's been a
Yeah,
lot of people
yeah,
saying things like, fucking they start that if they start with that 11, I'm going to burn my children in the street or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
You know, um, but it seems to make an awful lot of sense. You go with that
yeah,
solid 11, and
yeah,
then bring both the new guys on as and when an opportunity arises, let Man City sort of get a little bit tired, so maybe they get a bit more space, and see if we can affect the game. That said, I'm reasonably positive about it.
yeah, yeah.
I don't see any
To be
reason why we can't be looking forward to a win.
and I seem to remember Emerson having a pretty decent game against them last time. Because if he's asked to defend more, he's pretty good.
Yeah,
So I think he'll be all right. And
yeah.
then
Well, I mean, that is his strength, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stick with my prediction that we said last pod. I'm still going to stick with we'll win 2-1 tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It'll be a record-breaking day for Harry Kane.
I hope so. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't it? Just
We'll raise a glass.
that'd be perfect for him to break the record against the club that tried to sign him last year with a
Yeah.
derisory offer, apparently.
Well, Pep Guardiola's comments were interesting. I thought they have been a bit sort of paranoid, but he's suggesting that Harry Kane was one of the best strikers he's ever seen in his life, and really sort of really bigging him up. Um, One wonders whether that's come to us, Harry, next season, or whether that's just genuine praise for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Don't
mean,
know.
can you imagine them moving Haaland on to accommodate him though?
I
Or,
don't know. I mean, I think they'd do. They'd take both.
well, I suppose they could afford to, couldn't they?
Yeah.
But I wonder whether or not, I mean, Haaland's obviously scored an awful lot of goals already, but there's been quite a lot of disruption to that side. I mean, it's changed their style of play, and you would imagine that
Mm,
introducing Harry Kane to it at this stage would necessitate it changing again. I mean, obviously he would add something to that team, even alongside Haaland. But
mhm.
let's just hope that that is now pie in the sky.
Let's hope so. I know Chelsea's seem to be sniffing around as well, but I don't think I don't think we'd sell to them even if we were in the mind of selling him.
No.
Um, and hopefully he signs a new contract.
Mm, yeah, well, we will see.
We
But
shall
in
see.
24 hours' time, we will have a bit of a better idea of what the team's going to look like
Yeah.
for the second half of the season. So,
Well, actually, Paratici was talking about in some of his comments in on the video he posted at the end of the transfer window that now they're really looking forward to it. All the players, all the management now really are excited about the next part. The end of the season now with the sort of business end of it. They're positive about it. So that's good to hear.
yeah, I mean, we're in a decent position. We haven't lost too much space in. And if this can have been our wobble for the season, if this last sort
Yeah.
of 10 or 11 games can have been our really sticky patch. And if we can have come through that now, we've got a tough month ahead of us. I mean, we've
Mm,
got
mm.
Chelsea in a couple of weeks, we've got West Ham in a couple of weeks as well. I think we've got
AC
Leicester in there
Milan.
as well, AC Milan. So we've got a couple of really tough games coming up.
Mm.
And perhaps if what we're all slightly thinking is that perhaps the brakes have been on to conserve legs for this part of the season. If we now begin to see the brakes come off a little bit with these more dynamic players coming in,
Yeah.
then it could be all good, couldn't it? We
Yeah.
could begin to start getting excited.
And finally, we've got no injury concerns. Seems like everyone's back
Yeah, for now.
for now. Yeah.
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 It's never far away though, is it, Lee?
No, no, no. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be a good one.
Yeah, well, I'm building a bathroom on the boat this weekend, but I'm taking a couple of hours away from it to put myself through it. So I should be hopping up and down on a boat somewhere, swaying about in the water and getting overexcited, and hopefully for all the right reasons and not the wrong ones.
Yep. Okay. On that note, mate, we'll wrap it up. Shout out to Redemption, and also shout out to Totty Pie Mash. We thought they might have disappeared, but apparently they're still going strong.
Yeah, although I'm always in such a rush, they're always shut by the time I get past
Yeah,
that. One day I'll get in. One
yeah.
day. Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
mate.
nice to
On
speak
that
to you,
note,
mate.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you, buddy. Yep, and Coys.
Come on, you Spurs.